Hi, you're watching The Times of India. I'm Aditi Prasad. A stark contradiction has marked India in the post-COVID era. On the one hand, we've been consistently growing, acknowledged as the fastest growing major economy in the world. On the other hand, data from across sectors indicated that aspirational middle class Indians are reluctant to spend. And it is this data point that Nirmala Sitharaman has addressed in a big way in her eighth record budget by putting more money in the hands of the middle class. Now, joining me now is former banker and, of course, a very well-known corporate face, Naina Kidwai. Ma'am Kidwai, you know, Nirmala Sitharaman has presented eight budgets till now. Where would you rank this budget from the first to the eighth one?
Well, without having done a full analysis, I can only say that the confidence with which we go into this budget and the direction that this budget sets, it is a reform budget. It is a budget that sets the course in terms of what the next 4 to 5 years looks like, because there is mention right through in terms of the tax reform, which of course we will only see a week from now in terms of a bill which will be presented. We also know that between the economic survey and this budget, there's a fair bit of discussion on regulatory easing. And some mention again in the budget, which reflects this in terms of cleaning up the criminalization that often follows some of the regulation, the desire to make sure that it's a trust-based regulation rather than, as we've seen in the past, which was very rules-based.
Yes.
So extending, for example, the ability to repair your tax filings within 4 years rather than 2 years are all indications of a desire to make life easier for the taxpayer and give people a chance. And often, because the rules themselves are so confusing, people inadvertently end up doing the wrong thing. So it enables those that want to defraud the system will defraud the system. But for the millions and millions who do it more in error, the chance to make sure that they can stay within the lines as they are drawn out. So these are important directional places which I would give full marks to her. I think as with most budgets, and particularly now, there's this relative slowing down of our economy, albeit still a stronger economy than most in the world, but a relative slowing down to last year. The fact that she has stayed the fiscal course, 4.4%, managed to maintain the capex at, by and large, the old number. The 11.1 lakh was what was committed last budget. 10.18 is what has been spent. So we ran short. 91% of the old capex budget is what is expected to be used this year. So the next year's budget at 11.2 is in that sort of ballpark of the original budget, albeit higher than what was spent. So capex up, tax down, and she has given up money from the direct taxes because of the income tax slabs that have changed, with the promise of putting money in the hands of the middle class, which was a big request from many, from us at FICCI and indeed even at different forums. So with all this, to have managed and balanced the budget, staying with the fiscal deficit is really good.
Okay, that's of course remarkable. You talked about, and one of the clearer themes of her budget was, of course, long-term growth. This budget, in the opinion of many, is one of the most, actually since 2014, perhaps the most long-term growth-oriented budget since then. Of course, we are in a relative slowdown compared to last year, as you pointed out. The three reasons or four reasons, at least the top three reasons that come to my mind are, of course, low domestic demand in urban areas that she's addressed by putting more money in the hands of the middle class.
Yeah.
The second reason is, of course, the regulatory the over-regulation, which is probably preventing private investment to a very large extent, private capital investment in greenfield projects, etc., etc. For SMEs, for MSMEs, it's just something that has plagued the Indian economy for the longest time. So it's not
Yeah.
just a reflection of this government. But
Yeah.
with Narendra Modi coming and he came, there was all this talk about less government, more governance. 10 years later, now we finally see a budget which is actually talking about those reforms. About cutting down regulatory cholesterol. The economic survey almost said it in those many words. In that sense, would you call it the most long-term growth oriented budget since 2014?
I think all the budgets have set direction very well. And this course of reform, including on the regulatory and ease of doing business front, has been evident across these last few years. Does this give it more impetus? The statements are out there. We have to now see what actually happens on the implementation and the detail.
Right.
The desire to do it, I believe, has been there for the last decade. The progress has been slow. A budget is not going to be the place where we assess that. I think it's the outcomes as they go. But the good news is it's right there in the discussion, whether in the survey or in the budget. So the fact that the government is mindful of it and really wants to help, the focus on MSMEs, increasing the capturing of the MSME definition, because it's been doubled in terms of turnover sort of definitions. So the benefits that are available into these sectors become more widely applicable. So helping these sectors and the focus, whether it is on MSMEs, whether it is on agriculture, skill development and jobs, compliance and regulation, are all very important messages in terms of focus. Not all of this is going to fall within the finance ministry. Much of this is going to fall in terms of implementation down at the state level. But the statement of intention of the center is absolutely, as you said, very much focused on the reform agenda of this government.
So you say the talk is there in front of us for all of us to see. Now let's see if they walk the talk and how
Yeah.
effectively they're able to walk that talk. But coming to that, and I really want to ask you in terms of the lagging or the very slow private investment, because that is one of the key pillars on which growth can happen. How much is it? How much can the government do capital investment? It's at least the private sector needs to chip in, but
Yeah.
that's not really happened to that extent. Uh, could you just outline why that private investment has shrunk? I think it's been the case since the 2008 financial crisis. So since then, why is it not coming out in the form that it should be coming out? Because the fundamentals are strong, the stock market does very well. There's a lot of talk about how well India is doing, but why are those investments not coming as fast and as furious as required?
So India's performance in the manufacturing sector has at best been disappointing. And the manufacturing sector is a 17% contributor. The service sector is really what flies. And I think just as well for us that the service sector flies the way it does, because it is a big employment generator. Uh, Within manufacturing, my own view is that so much of modern manufacturing is really not labor intensive. Uh, you could be spending 50,000 crores on an aluminium plant and employ 200 people. So it's not going to solve for a very key aspect, which this government is very focused on and which India has to be focused on, which is employment generation. And I think, therefore, specifically for this government, for this budget, to talk about the toy sector, leather sector, mention of handicrafts, tourism, these are very labor intensive areas. And I think they have been picked up for focus exactly for that reason, that the skilling we provide and the focus we provide on labor intensive manufacture, labor intensive service sectors like tourism, are very, very important in terms of employment. The private sector stepping in, there are sectors which are very demand and consumption driven. You're not going to invest in a new plant if your existing capacity utilization is 70%. You'll only invest when it inches up to 100. So you have to be able to see that that demand and consumption is there. And that has been one of the demands, therefore, of industry. And that is indeed a very big step this government has taken in terms of increasing the slabs at which the tax cuts in. Putting more money into the hands of the middle class is critical so that that demand can drive growth. Growth will indeed lead to private capex. Ease of doing business. This is not only at the hands of the center. This has to be right down to the state level, so that it attracts more MSMEs, in particular, into the investment cycle. Both big and small industry will need to look at what those opportunities are. And the PLI schemes the government brought in were in that direction. I think different schemes have seen mixed success, great success in electronics, for example. India has really moved from being a huge importer into now an exporter of some of these products. Focus, for example, on the whole EV sector, batteries, etc., where we are quite dependent on import, again, looking to push this in terms of domestic manufacture. So as a first step, anything that we manufacture for the domestic economy is in our hands, as long as it is price competitive and we don't get thrust into uncompetitive, high price, low quality goods just for the sake of manufacture. So it's a tough balancing act when you've got cheap and high quality goods being manufactured in China. How do we benchmark ourselves against that so that we don't take the money out of the consumer's hands by the consumer having to buy a more expensive product? So it's a case of now moving to domestic manufacturing for domestic demand. Exports, which would be domestic manufacturing for exports, is a journey we've embarked on. India's performance there is middling, to say the least. And we are now giving it a big push at a time when the world is actually moving in the direction of, which is quite anti-trade. And whether you see what's happening in the US, even as we speak, in terms of tariffs going up, in the US setting up its barriers, and they're a big trading partner of India, what does it mean for exports in the whether services or manufacturing and the impact therein? So exports is not going to be an easy discussion given the headwinds and the geopolitics of trade in the world. But we are fortunate that we have a very large domestic demand and domestic population. And to the extent that we can substitute imports with quality goods, manufacture here, provide jobs, push the service sector, huge success in the services sector in terms of these GCCs, the Centers for Global Excellence, which are being set up across industries. These are good job generators. They deploy talent. Many are moving to tier 2 towns. So it's spreading beyond the usual Bangalore, Hyderabad, Delhi sort of circuit into tier 2 towns. And the push that we make for these, the ease with which we deal with it, the tax consistency, tax certainty that we provide these businesses, the mention, for example, on transfer pricing, clarity therein. I think we still have a very confusing tax structures in this country. Too much tax
which hopefully should get resolved with the bill coming.
Absolutely. I think it's one of the easiest things to resolve because it just requires paperwork. If we can get it right on paper, we can make it simple, then we don't have to have the litigation we have on tax at every level. So I think that is an area which we will really, I wait with bated breath for announcements in a week from now.
We look forward to that as well. You know, you talked about how corporate India was rooting for putting more money in the hands of the middle class. It's not just that, the middle class itself, was considerable anger because there was a sea water
Inflation.
with the inflation and with paying those taxes despite that inflation. To what extent would this new rupees 12 lakh exemption satisfy the middle class, according to you?
Well, I don't think we're ever happy with what we get. There will always be a need and feel for more. But it's significant. I mean, 1 lakh
Yeah,
crore,
it's not just a tinkering, it's a
it's a
big
big
one.
one. And I think people should have a cause to celebrate, because I certainly didn't expect such a big jump. I thought there would be tinkering at the margin, but this is really big. And I think it is cause for celebration. We should just make sure it's not eaten away by inflation, which fortunately looks like it's on the way down. Interest rates, where now 30% of bank credit is indeed in individuals' hands. So some relief on interest rates, which has to come from RBI, not from the budget. But I would hope that that's also on its way in terms of interest rate cuts. And all of this will further help in leaving money in the hands of individuals, so that the feel-good feeling of which leads to spending money will continue or improve the economy because of the demand and consumption it will generate.
Is there a political message in this budget?
Oh, I think there's, which government would ignore that? Bihar got mentioned under 3 different schemes. No other state did. All states benefit. All states benefit from all schemes, but Bihar got specific mention, and that's no surprise. Not that it doesn't need it. It needs every one of those schemes, but, Bihar and the Makana mission, etc. Important. And but you can certainly see the politics of that. Middle class, this is a vote bank that the BJP always had. And India is now a middle class economy. Gone are the days where we have to do everything in our economy for the poor alone. And that, I think, is an important message, and one that we have to be mindful of. It's good for the country, it's good for politics.
Right. So to sum up, I would sort of want to ask you, before you go away, 3 biggest highlights that stand out for you from Budget 2025.
Yeah. So I think one, as I just mentioned, the whole balancing act, even while reducing tax, brilliant.
Right.
The second, which we haven't touched on, is the continued focus on successful schemes that this government has had, the Jal Jeevan Mission, the Swachh Bharat Mission. And I was just looking at the numbers, and I was very relieved to see that even though the Jal Jeevan Mission has achieved 80% of tap water going to every household, the desire to meet the 100% remains. And there has been a huge increase in that budget of 198%. The Swachh Bharat Mission, one of the most successful programs of this government, lauded around the world, 145% increase. Water, sanitation, recycling of waste, all of these areas getting very high focus. Then the cleaning of rivers, the National Ganga Plan sees an increase of 13%. 70% increase under the River Basin Management Scheme. So how do we preserve our rivers? How do we help our rivers? These programs, again, government has seen success, and I'm really glad that they aren't giving up on it, because having seen the success, understood that we have the capacity to show improvement, encourages more spending in these very important areas. So the entire budget in the whole water resource development, rejuvenation of rivers, etc., provision of water and sanitation to the individual level, and particularly water and sanitation helps on the health indices. That if you have a clean, hygienic environment and clean water, you're not dying from diarrhea, you don't have filth around you, and God alone knows we have lots to do in the urban area now. Rural has been a good success. Urban is still a mess. Our municipalities have to step up. And if we can get the hygiene and health allocations sorted out in this way, we would achieve a lot. I would then just add that the whole area of nutrition, education, women, skill development, and jobs. So, which is again about how does the person at the bottom of the pyramid benefit from all of this. Those schemes like Poshan, etc., have also continued to see investment. The women-led development is the theme. We have every one of these schemes women will benefit from, but there are also specifically women's schemes for entrepreneurship, women's schemes for credit guarantee, women's schemes for access to credit, all of which should help. So I think that whole bundle is very well handled as well.
Yeah, but do you think the various announcements for women are truly substantive in nature, or rhetorical for the most part?
Uh, they're there. And the fact that the mention of women has really only mainly started in the last couple of years gives me cause for some joy.
Okay.
Some of it needs changing at the state level. So the classic is that in most states now, women are not allowed to do night shifts. So what happens is a company thinks twice about deploying women, because
Before
if they're only
hiring.
going to do day shifts, then the men end up finding that they bear the burden of the night shift. Not that women are reluctant, but because law, order, security, all of these become issues. There are companies who have actually committed to the state government that they will take the responsibility, because they will collect the woman, see her back, make sure that the law or safety aspects get handled. So we have to at least enable it. The responsibility should be the state. Why isn't our country safe for women, whether it's morning or night? Is a very different discussion and should absolutely be addressed. But at least leave it open to the company that can do it, to be able to do it. And there are companies who've engaged with the states, and I believe that in UP, for example, a couple of companies I know managed to persuade the chief minister, who then enabled this of night shifts for women in their factories. So I think some of it is about regulations which have been there for a few hundred years, which need review in terms of the needs of today. And it brings women into jobs.
Women
I
can
was just
become.
going to say on women in this budget, the Grameen credit score framework was mentioned. And this becomes important because the self-help group microfinance area, which is seeing stress, is mainly money which goes through women's self-help groups. And the stress that is being faced there, and money is actually now withdrawing out of the sector. Or RBI has also got a keen eye on multiple loans that an individual may have in there, can impact the way women are accessing credit at the rural level. And the good thing is, by developing this credit scoring system, we are going to be able to gauge if the multiple loans taken by one person are loans that she is not going to be able to pay back. So make sure that the whole microfinance movement, which is a huge women empowerment movement in the country, doesn't go bad, and then it will come back to hurt us for decades if indeed it isn't monitored properly now.
All right. Thank you so much, ma'am, for speaking to us. Thank you for those inputs and that perspective on Budget 2025. I look forward to speaking with you again to get some more notes on this entire women in business, in corporate, in entrepreneurship, and how do we move that vertical forward? How do we move that compact forward? Because women rising up and joining the workforce and becoming more active in the workforce is perhaps the way to go if India indeed has to become Viksit Bharat by 2047. Thank you so much for your time, ma'am, and look forward to
Thank you,
speaking with you.
Aditi. Yeah.